on the street regarding health is hydrate. The new word regarding that is live, spelled L-I-V. So get out and live life well with products and systems made with new technology that you simply add to or take with water. You hydrate, lose weight, cleanse your system, gain energy, and it is all natural. Go to mylivezone.com/Kawada to find out more. Live, L-I-V zone.com/Kawada. Let's all get out and live life well.
Dave and Tiff back at you here for another podcast. University of Hawaii, the backdrop, because football is in the air. University of Hawaii played their first football game, not at the stadium, which is going to be the new home stadium behind Tiff in the backdrop there, but at UCLA, took a tough loss, but they're playing their first home game at the new UHTC Ching Field. What is it going to be called? Is it the TC Ching Stadium? How was it?
TC Ching Athletic Complex.
So they're not calling it, they just say played at TC Ching Athletic Complex? I thought they might say the TC Ching Stadium. Because it is
for me.
It is kind of a stadium. Well, anyway, so that's coming up this weekend. But our guest today on this episode of the podcast is the newest member of the ESPN Honolulu Countdown to Kickoff pregame radio show, former head coach, longtime head coach in the high school ranks here at Honolulu High School, as well as Kaiser High School. Also coach collegiately as well. Arnold Martinez will be joining us in this episode. So we'll talk to him about the first kickoff show they had this past weekend, and also how the team did and kind of his recap of the game. So excited to have Arnold joining us. But not only was it the opening weekend for UH football, you and I had a pretty busy weekend, because after 21 months, both University of Hawaii women's volleyball and women's soccer finally got to play a regular season match. You being the radio play-by-play voice for volleyball, I got to be the public address announcer at soccer. Let's start with women's volleyball. No fans, which is kind of a bummer, at least for this first few weeks, but opening game, first game in such a long time. What was kind of the vibe? How was it?
Thankful, happy, an opportunity. And like you said, both soccer and volleyball didn't have a season last year, not on anything that they did. It was just the conference first postponed 2020 fall sports, and then later on in 2020 they decided to officially cancel the fall sports season. So it was unfortunate for those players, for all of the programs, to not have an opportunity to showcase their talents. And so you get through fall camp, you get to the opening night, all the players are excited, everyone's stoked. Feels like Christmas. It's a new opportunity, and you talk to head coach Robin Amo, and I'll believe it when I see that first ball go over the net on a serve, and I know, all right, we're playing. And it's just, everybody's just happy to be out there. Got a good quality win on the opening night against Fairfield. Took a tough 3-0 loss to Marquette, a very good team that ironically is ranked in this week's top 25 coaches poll, a team that actually got to play during the spring, returned all the starters. 2 of the 3 sets went to deuce. You were down by as many as 10 points in one set. Grit, fight, how this team claws back, got it to within 3, lose it ultimately by 4, and then close out the tournament with a nice 3-0 win against Texas A&M. You're still receiving votes in the top 25 coaches poll. A good quality weekend at 2-1. Now the competition gets a little bit tougher. Going on the road this week, you got Utah Valley, San Diego, and Utah. The Toreros and Utes both top 25 this week. 2 true road matches, 1 neutral site match. Good quality competition for this young program.
You know, soccer had 2 games over the weekend. They came away with 1 tie and a loss. Did not get to score any goals in those 2 games, which was a bummer for me, because as the public address announcer, I was ready to make that big goal. You know, when they score a goal, a big, huge. Anyway, I'll save that for when the time comes and the next opportunity that I have. But I think it's hard for people to understand how big of adjustment these 2 squads had to deal with without having played. I mean, everyone can say about, well, you could have practiced, you could have worked out, you could have stayed in shape, but you know,
still did.
Yeah, but athletes, there's a difference between being in shape and then being in game shape. And when you have been void of playing games for such a long period of time, I mean, that just totally throws that whole your training calendar out of whack. So I would think naturally you'd see, I would bet University of Hawaii women's volleyball team will be, if they ever got a chance to play Marquette again, whether it be NCAA tournament or what have you, of course it'll be further down the season. But if even if they were to play next week, I think that team would be, it'll be a much different performance. And even for soccer too, because these are the first games these kids are facing since such a long time, the longest in any University of Hawaii sports team compared to any other. So that, I think people don't realize how much of a factor not playing is on these two squads.
Oh, definitely. And we go back to that Marquette loss. You look, ultimately, you see a 3-0 loss, but when you look at the set scores, the first two sets decided by 2 points. And in that first set, Hawaii had a set point opportunity, just couldn't close out, gave up a 3-0 run to eventually fall in that first set. Second set, you had a couple of freshman miscues. One, you had a rotation violation on a serve, which very rarely do you see called in the collegiate game. And then you had a couple other points that could have gone here or there. And, you know, something goes the other way, and maybe Hawaii is up 2-0. Maybe the match is tied 1-1. You look at that third set, like we said earlier, you're down by 10. Team could have folded. You could have lost 25-8, but that's not how Coach Robin coaches. That's not how her players play. And you watch them just fight and chip away. And ultimately, yes, you lose it by 4 points, but it could have been a lot worse. And so if you watch it, you're proud of the team for how they fought. Just a little bit too much of a hole they dug deep and just couldn't get out of. But ultimately, overall, good weekend, 2-1. Brooke Van Sickle and Amber Igidi both named to the conference to that Hawaiian Airlines Rainbow Wahine Classic All Tournament team. So overall, a good weekend. A lot of things that you can correct. Thought the serving was great. A lot of aces to not a whole lot of service errors, and that's something that head coach Rob Adamo wants to have. Is you keep it in play, and if you get an ace, great. But more so, get it in play, keep them out of system, and just give your block, give your defense a chance.
One of the highlights of over at soccer, which is played over at Waipio Soccer Stadium, is that on the very first day, this is a 4-team Friday Sunday tournament, but issues with fans. University of Hawaii is not allowing any fans. That's because of the mandates put on by the city. Visiting crowd from one of the visiting schools was there, and for anyone who has never been to Waipio Soccer Stadium, it's not a secured stadium. Yeah, there's no gate that you can keep people out of. You can just literally walk from the parking lot, walk up the mound, and you're looking down into the stadium. And there are people who are there. They either didn't get the memo or what have you, but you know, the folks at the University of Hawaii on site had to call HPD. You know, one of their parents from the school came and had a little confrontation, one of the University of Hawaii folks, in terms of why can't we stay? I'd like to speak to someone. That whole thing. Then the officials didn't show up on time for the first day in the first game. So aside from that, you had the fans thing. But you know, that brought up an issue because as I was talking to the UH athletics folks who are handling the situation, is that this was Friday afternoon. And there is concern with social media that if someone's around and they snap a picture of people watching soccer or in and around the vicinity of the stadium as if they're watching soccer, and that gets out, you know, the city and or the state could put a sanction on UH and say, look, you guys are violating our mandate. You can't have any more athletic contests. So that was a real concern, that they thought they would not be able to hold football this coming weekend because if someone, you know, it was deemed UH is violating the mandate. So that was a big concern. Luckily, and congratulations to the folks at University of Hawaii Athletics who handled the situation. They did very well, and the games went on. The officials.
Well, something that will be happening this week for volleyball. I'm not sure if you've seen this, but Utah Valley on Thursday, they are selling general admission tickets. Their facility only holds about 2,000. Fans will be in. Friday and Saturday when the University of Utah hosts the Utah Classic. All matches will have fans. Now the Huntsman Center seats over 13,000, so you haven't seen if there's any sort of restrictions, but this will be the first week that Hawaii will be playing in front of fans, at least for volleyball, and it will be on the continent. Now we know that this mandate goes into the next couple of weeks, and within that time frame, next week women's volleyball will be here. They host your alma mater, USC, for 2 matches. More than likely, fans won't be there for those 2. It's just a matter of how long will University of Hawaii won't have fans.
And I believe University of Hawaii is the only college currently that is not allowing fans in their facilities, because everyone else is maybe on a restricted basis, but there are fans seemingly everywhere else. So you can see where the confusion can come from visiting fans, because in their state, they're allowed to, but in Hawaii, you're just not. So you just got to follow the rules. All right, well, let's get into some football, because University of Hawaii did play football this past week. They're playing next week at home for the first home opener. And to talk a little bit about that with us is our guest, Arnold Martinez, longtime high school coach, also coach on the collegiate level, part of the ESPN Honolulu's Countdown to Kickoff broadcast preview show. So let's take some time out with Coach Arnold Martinez.
Award-winning Hawaii sports writer Cindy Lewis shares her love of volleyball and other sports topics with her new website, cindylewis.com. After nearly 40 years of covering the top events in Hawaii, Cindy brings her reporting flair and insight to the digital format for all to enjoy. Get the very latest information on University of Hawaii volleyball for all teams, women, men, and beach, from one of the most respected journalists in the state. Go to cindylewis.com and you will be connected.
Well, we're happy to be joined by a new, it's funny, Coach, because you've been promoted on the radio as part of the new ESPN Honolulu Countdown to Kickoff on the radio for University of Hawaii broadcasts. And really, the new is you. So I guess when they say the new ESPN Honolulu Countdown to Kickoff pregame show, it's really you. So congratulations. We have Arnold Martinez, former head coach of Honolulu High School, Kaiser High School, and now a new member of the Countdown to Kickoff crew before every broadcast of the University of Hawaii football season. So, Coach, thanks for coming on with us.
No, thank you for having me. And it's funny you say the new thing. It's I thought, well, to me, it's all new, right? You know what I mean? And I know they had a show, but there are some new formats too. So it's just not, those are the pros. I'm just a squirrel trying to get a nut, and I'm just visiting. And but they're the pros. And, and again, thank you guys for having me on here. Dave, you and I go way back. We've done some games way back in the past, I think, high school on the radio. And Tiff, nice to meet you. Yeah, so this is all... Well. Yeah, it's great to see you guys. I hear you guys on the radio, so you guys do a great job, awesome job. And
thank you.
I'm just learning. I'm a rookie, and I'm trying to get better. And it's an opportunity, just a blessing to be with Gary and Chris as well. So thank you guys.
You know that all the success you have, Coach, I always take credit for it, because I like to brag that I was the one that got you involved with radio. You were still coaching at the time. We're doing high school radio broadcasts, and we said, hey, state tournament, we need somebody to come in and do it. You came on, had your notes, you're ready, you gave such great insight. But going back to this past Saturday, University of Hawaii had their first game against UCLA, so that was the first Countdown to Kickoff show. How'd it go?
I think it went great. It was again, a learning experience for me, and just to jump in there and learn the cues, the background stuff that the people don't get to see on the other side of the radio or on the other sid of the camera. So you got to know, the timing, right? You taught me about timing when I first started doing games with you as well. So you broke me in there, and you helped the rookie out. So so that's good. But it's very enjoyable. I like it. I look at it like I'm coaching on film with my players. Like when they ask me a question, if it's about something technical with football, I just look at it like I'm still teaching. You know what I mean? And I love to teach. I love to teach the game and share because I got a bunch of stuff from a lot of coaches in the past, and that's all we do is we share with each other to get better. We all don't know the right answer. We just all try to figure it out. So it's good. It's fun. The radio thing is really fun.
we're going to get, I know you also do
Yeah.
a podcast as well. We're going to get to that a little bit. But one of the things is, I mean, the guests that you have, I mean, you have Dabo Sweeney, the head coach of Clemson, and you're getting some of these college coaches. But I know that you know, over the past couple of years and maybe even further back in history, you were one of those that you would take whatever free time you had, wouldn't you, and go to either spring practices of D1 colleges, even in the NFL, for your own personal professional development. How long have you been doing those kind of things?
Gosh, I made it a point to do that early on, even before I got to Hawaii, when I was, head coach in junior college, and then also an assistant coach in college. Even when I was assistant coach at Cal Young, I learned it then, really in my 20s, when Steve Mariucci and the guys at the Niners would allow us just free reign of, being in the facility, sitting in meetings and learning, because, Mooch was our Cal head coach at one time, and he left for the 49er job when we were in the Bay Area. And then I learned it then, and really all the coaches were, the older guys would say, this is what you got to do. You got to go and learn and see what everybody's doing to develop your own philosophy, right? And so I learned it then, and I continued it. And then I made it a point when I became a head coach. I said, okay, well, we need to do training for our staff. And, the best way to do it is to be there firsthand and not seeing it from a fan's point of view, but being in the meetings, listen to what they're teaching, the pedagogy, the teaching progressions, and then being right back on the field with them for that morning or afternoon practice session, and seeing it transfer right to the field. And to me, that was always the best way to train and to get better and to continue to learn. And so I did it way back then. And then I had my staff, whether, my high school staff's here in Hawaii, each spring, as many times as we could, we just set up. So we spent time with Chip Kelly when Marcus was there in Oregon. We've been down to UCLA, Cal, Clemson. And so, you just find, because coaching is a network too. It's a fraternity. The coaches respect each other very well and are very open. I even had a chance to do it in at the pro level. So had a chance to, while I was coaching at Moanalua, I spent a number of camps at the Seattle Seahawks. And so that was really, really awesome. Pete Carroll was a great guy. Has a house here down at the North Shore. So he's part Hawaiian. No, he's he's part local, not Hawaiian, but local. Yeah. And then so yeah, he was super accommodating as well, very professional. And then you're in the building and you're learning and growing, right? Same thing. And then later that led to I got hired on an NFL internship with the Atlanta Falcons in 2016. And so you just keep going and get as much info as you can and see how it fits your scheme. Now, a lot of times you go to a place that runs something similar to what you run, you know what I mean? And so like I would pick a school if I knew a coach and just kind of reach out and ask for the opportunity to bring the staff and say, okay, they have very similar concepts to what we're trying to run offensively or defensively. I'll tell you a funny story is sometimes coaches would say, hey, coach, let's go to the all coaches clinic, or the Nike Coach of the Year clinic in Vegas. So there's a Coach of the Year clinic in Vegas every year. And then they would always try to finagle me, right? Say, hey, coach, because I would say, okay, listen, if we go there, I'm probably not going to see you for 2 days. Yeah. You know what I mean? You're going to be, having a good time somewhere, right. And very little lecture time and note-taking time. So when you go to a staff the way we were doing it, it's like very unique because you're getting one-on-one time. You're in the meetings, and then the coaches are very accommodating. A lot of them will sit down with you for a half hour. If you have any questions for technique or schematics, sit with you, answer your questions. You take your notes. Like we break up by position group. So if I bring my position coaches, and then we meet out on the field for practice, we're taking notes, and then we have good dinner afterwards. And we would spend about a week. It actually, every time we went, it was a week. In camp with the college that we visited. Yeah. So that's good.
Coach, in the time that you've been coaching high school, and you see kids sometimes, sometimes 3 years, maybe 2, some often maybe just a year. What's maybe been your biggest joy as a head coach in high school football?
Oh man, honestly, it's when I see them continue and play in college somewhere. You know, we won our fair share of championships, whether it's high school or wherever I coached before. But, you know, I think I had counted, and we were averaging, you know, at Moanalua alone, you know, we had at least 5 or 6 guys every year play at some level, whether it's NAIA, Division 3, 2, 1. And to see them when they sign and get an opportunity and have their tuition cut down to either zero or very minimal, you know, like 6,000 for 4 years or something like that. I mean, like a, you know, a smaller school that doesn't have a full scholarship. But, you know, to see that, you know, that's one of my, I think, greatest accomplishments as a coach, to be honest with you. I feel like that's one of the most important things is featuring them in such a way that they help the team, but knowing that we can project that kid out like, hey, you have a chance to play here if that's what you and your parents want. How can we get you there? You know what I mean? And are you willing to put in the work? And then when they do, and then they graduate, and then we see that signing day, if it's PIA, wherever, you know, man, that's the best. You know, that's the best show. I still look back at that, and I still keep contact with so many of the guys. It's awesome.
Is it tough to watch a game, whether it's pro or college or even high school, and to either watch it from a fan's perspective or in say this, you know, during this year, you're one of the pregame hosts, you know, for the new Countdown to Kickoff here on ESPN Honolulu. Is it tough to be a fan, to watch a game, and then to throw on the analyst hat and then kind of make that differentiation between like a fan's perspective, but also putting your coaching hat on?
It's a great question, Tiff. And I tell people this, you know, when you watch as much film as coaches watch, sometimes we forget how to be a fan. You know what I mean? And so you're always, you know what I mean? You're just looking at film, you're breaking it down. We don't have any sound to it. You're looking at the all 22. For those listening, it's everybody on the screen. And we don't see it as entertainment value sometimes, right? But it is fun entertainment. And so, like, let's say I'm at a Super Bowl party. I get, you know, they see a great catch and a fantastic play. And then I see, man, that was great protection by that offensive tackle, you know. And they're like, what the heck are you talking about? Did you see the touchdown on that? You know what I mean? It's like, no, well, you don't get the touchdown if that guy doesn't protect well. You know, the coaches are cuckoo. Our minds are cuckoo. They're wired like that because we see the film, we watch too much film. But you know what? I actually can switch it. Sometimes when I watch with my son, we'll get after it and just have fun. You know what I mean? Like, and I'll just watch from a fan too. And he'll show me highlights and then I'll watch from a fan. When we teach our kids, by the way, it's a good question, is when, especially high school, you know, I like to get my guys ready for when they go to college. They're going to watch a lot of film. And so we would watch film. And my caveat in the very beginning is, okay, listen, here's my disclaimer. Listen, fellas, we're not watching it for entertainment at this moment. We can watch for entertainment at another time or have a little bit at the end. But we're watching to see, did you take the right step? You know what I mean? Was your angle correct when you opened your hips? Did you shift your weight correctly in this block? You know, it's very minute, the minutia. And to get a kid to do that, it's actually hard, you know. It's really hard because they just want to say, oh, look at that hit, coach.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. So good question, though. Great question.
Thank you, Coach. Now, my last question for you is we watched the game. We know the score. We know the Bruins beat Hawaii pretty handily this past Saturday. Just going from week 0 to week 1, what's maybe the biggest obstacle? I mean, not the biggest obstacle, but maybe what's the most part of UH's game you would like to see improved going from week 0 here into week 1?
It's funny. I actually have some recap notes here. Hang on a second. I won't give them all to you, but, you know, just in preparation for the next week, too, I think there are a number of things they can do better. But let's say this. Let's talk everybody off the ledge for a minute. I don't think the sky's not going to fall, you know, in one week versus a Pac-12 team who, honestly, was playing out of desperation and with fire and passion, right? The Chip's playing for his job at right now. And everybody probably knows that in UCLA. And so those guys came out with an energy. I don't think, you know, UH just didn't match that, honestly, in the beginning. You can see the energy, the body language, the twitch. We always look for fast twitch. The coaches want to see who jumps out on the screen. There were bodies flying around for UCLA. If they weren't getting in the sack, they were diving 4 yards in the air trying to get a touch on the sack. I mean, it was crazy. And so I don't think folks should sell the farm and bail out. You know what I mean? It's way too early. One game, but you heard people were going kind of crazy. I heard, and it's like, whoa, let's temper it a little bit. I think it's gonna be okay. We'll see. I think there's obviously, now get to your question. There has to be some improvement for sure. And they do play, right, an FCS team this week in Portland State. And people always say, well, they've never lost to it used to be 1AA level. But let's not even, to be honest, as a coach, I don't look back at those win-loss records in history because none of those kids are playing anymore. Whether those things that happen on paper, those guys are gone. Some of them are 30, 40 years old. You know what I mean? So this group has to play, and this group has to improve. And specifically, as far as, the recap, I know my notes are on the other side, so I'll turn my mic this way. No. Offensive line protection has to, if we're looking at the offense, it starts in the trenches. The O-line has to obviously protect better. They ran into a juggernaut right this week. As far as UCLA were coming, the front four was awesome without bringing any pressure. Then they added to the pressure and they brought, 5 and 6. 5 and 6. And when they do that, if you go empty, UH wasn't empty a lot. I'd like to see them figure out a way to protect a little bit better. Usually when you go empty, someone's accounted for that. So they take a defensive player out of the box that will follow him or that'll be his assignment. UCLA dared them, said, we'll bring in, we have too many guys. You can't block us, right? We're going to bring 7 sometimes. You have 5. You're not going to block all of us. And they got it because it just was, they got in there really, really fast. And so, there's some things they can do protection-wise. There's other things they can slow down. I don't know how much time you got. I can go through a bunch. But and then defensively, got to stop the run. That was the number one thing coming into the season based on, the last time they had played last season during the pandemic year. And UCLA went roughshod on those guys, in the interior gap, A gap, B gap. And a lot of that is gap integrity. Obviously the front four have an assignment. They have their gap. For those listeners, A, B, C, and D gap. Sometimes O, we call it, if it's outside gap. And everyone has, a responsibility. And there's going to be a box player who sets the edge. There's going to be a leverage player who's inside out on the gap. But everybody has to fit the right place. And A and B gaps were getting exposed on UCLA. And that could be a function of a number of things. It could be either one-on-one blocks with UCLA's line was just dominant. I didn't break down the all 22. I couldn't, I don't have that film, but, or, it was a missed technique. Now, when you look at the film, if it's technique and they just didn't dominate you, then you can correct that. That's a correctable thing. And they can correct that for this week and get better at it, right? Or it could be a linebacker on the second level who didn't fit his gap correctly. And that can be a number of things. It could be he misread it, misstepped. That's a technique issue. They can fix that. You know what I mean? They can look at it and say, okay, I got to get better at that. But if it was just a flat out got blasted off the ball because UCLA out-athlete them, just had better athletes, then and your technique is right, then you can't really do anything about that. But I think there's a lot of correction that they're going to be able to do. And I think they're going to be able to right the ship. And I'm looking forward to, and they want to send a message, first time, I think, since 1974, December 7, 1974, UH has not played at Aloha Stadium. And now they're playing on their campus. Even though there's no fans, it's still very meaningful. So I expect to see some passion and some energy, right? And then a bounce back game. They want to put this one behind them and really let it out. Play with that emotion, play with that energy, and then fix the technique. I mean, there's a lot more technique, but like I said, I don't know how much time we got. It'd be too long.
I'm totally excited for this playing on campus, and that's I just can't wait for that to get going. We're joined here by Arnold Martinez, former head coach with Mauna Loa at Kaiser, also in the collegiate level. And here's something I think you're tired of me asking. Every time we've done a game, I think I've asked some version of this question of you because it still bothers me. Okay, it's just one of those things. All right. I've noticed, and since you coached in the high school ranks in Hawaii for several years,
sure,
it seems like whatever University of Hawaii offensively does, generally offensively, whatever scheme they run, it trickles down into almost all the high schools start to run the same system, right? When Bob Wagner was the head coach at the University of Hawaii and they ran the spread, every high school is running the triple option off the spread.
Yep.
June Jones comes in and it's the 4 wide. And that offense has stuck. And in fact, now almost every college seems to run that system, it seems like. And now every high school is also doing the same thing. Shotgun, 4 wide, 1 back, and you run your offense from that set. And I've always tried to find someone who, which I haven't found one yet, by the way, who would agree with me. Like, if I was a coach of a high school team, let's say, I would try and run something different, because if everybody else is doing the same type of offensive scheme, majority, let's say I'm a coach in the OIA, if I ran something different, when we played teams, they would have to totally prepare their defense in a totally different way than they have been, trained for up until that point, which was the factor when people ran the wishbone back in the day, right? People didn't run that often. So that was something new and you had to prepare, and that gave the advantage to the offense. So my question is, after all that grumbling, is why doesn't more coaches maybe think that way and say, you know what, let's run something different instead of the shotgun 4 wide?
I think that trends travel, you know what I mean, and they travel from college, sometimes pro, and sometimes it trickles up. New England didn't run a lot of spread until Belichick and Josh McDaniels, those guys said, hey, let's open it up a little bit. Let's go 3-by-2, which is empty, and let's go some 2-by-2 doubles and put Brady back there and just let him get rid of the ball. I think what happens is the trends travel, and then people see them and say, hey, man, that looks like a good system. But you are absolutely right, because really what you do, I don't think there's so many ways, right, to skin a cat, or whatever the terminology is. Oh, my light just went out. Did that mess you guys up?
No, we can still see you.
All right, good. And then the trends travel, and then to me, I agree with you. So when I got here in 2003, what I did was I looked at our personnel, and I almost can guarantee you every coach will look at their personnel first, right, and say, what system fits our personnel the best? Okay. When I got to Moanalua, for instance, we had a very low roster at the time, and I had guards that were 180 pounds soaking wet. Okay. So those guys, and 5'8", 5'9". Okay. And we're going to play Campbell. We're going to play, bigger teams, bigger players. And I said, you know what? Probably not the best to just try to block that guy, one-on-one, and try to drive block, scoop block, run block, and all these, pass block. But if I have good athlete at quarterback and I have smaller linemen, option is the way to go. So then you look at triple option, and you tell your little guard, hey, you're not blocking that 280-pound guy. Leave him. And you're like, oh yes, coach, I can do that. I don't have to block that guy. Yeah, don't touch that guy. We're going to option him, and you go get the linebacker, because see, that linebacker is a little bit more your size. Oh, okay, coach, I got. So now you gear a system to, and then the plus of that is, you're right. If you're the only team running triple in the conference, there's no way they can simulate that in weeks practice. There's no way they can simulate the timing, the speed at which you get to the second level and run the option, because it's a lot of timing in triple. You know what I mean? And in that type of offense. And so, but a team who doesn't run it has a hard time simulating it and getting you ready during practice during the week. So you're right. If they continually play against something that they see every week, oh, this is easy to defend because the concepts are the same, or this is easy to attack the defense because the concepts are the same. And so, yeah, that thinking does exist. But I think the coaches that look at their player skill set. So you mentioned some of the podcast guests. We've had Dan Quinn, D coordinator at Dallas Cowboys. I just dropped Gus Bradley yesterday. He's the D coordinator at former Jaguars head coach. He's D coordinator of the Raiders. And I think both of them mentioned you develop your scheme according to players' skill set and strengths, right? And so if a guy can do a certain thing, well, you don't put him in a scheme that doesn't call for that. You know what I mean? And then when you get your puzzle, your players, and you get all your players together, once you have your scheme that you think you're going to run that best fits you, then how do you execute it? How do you play call it the right way? How do you get the matchups you want? How do you get the advantages that you want? How do you get the ball into the playmakers' hands? For me on offense, it was like, hey, the number one playmakers were always the O-line because we don't make any plays without them, and then we used to give them special awards because they don't get any stats, and then we make them feel great about what they're doing because without that, it doesn't work. And then it's like, okay, you got this kid who's a burner. He's vertical. You got this kid who's fast, twitchy, shifty. How do we get him the ball in the flat in space on a linebacker? How do you match him up? So there's a lot of, it's the ultimate chess game. People think, you just kind of roll the ball out there and it's just football and you say said HUD and you throw it or you hand it off. No, there's a lot of different, there's so much preparation that you have to look at all the intricacies of everybody's strengths and then put them in the right spot and then call the play to get them in the right spot and get the right matchup. Because what ultimately you want to do is force your opponent and attack them in such a way they're at a disadvantage, right? I mean, that's really what it is. And so it's knowing your skill set. But I know what you're saying is when I got here, I think everybody ran the run and shoot. And then we said, well, I can't run the run and shoot. I said, but we can run option. And we did well with the guy named Stanford Letty, who was OIA Player of the Year and All-State and played both ways and did great. And we only had a roster of, I think, 30 at the time. Went 9-3 and won the first championship. So yeah, it's you can if you do that, you can find ways to get some wins too. You know what I mean? Like that you might not otherwise have gotten.
And last thing, Coach, I just wanted to give a little shout out to your podcast, Tips and Overthrows, which we can see the logo over your right shoulder. But you just gave a tease as your latest pod. Give us a little summary again on that, the most recent episode that is out there.
Yeah, so just yesterday, we released an episode with Gus Bradley, who's the former head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was the architect of the Legion of Boom. So that year, I actually, at Seattle Seahawks, so that's when we connected. I got to spend a week with them and back then and really just hung out and just absorbed as much as I could. And we just stayed in touch ever since. And so now he's the defense coordinator for the Silver and Black, the Raiders. So all the faithful out there can take a listen and see what his thoughts are on how to, what you just asked, how do you go about your, deciding what scheme you're going to run, get guys in the right position, what type of defensive identity you want. We talk about all that on there for the Raiders. So then he talks about, for the podcast, I also let people get into the minds of coaches on their journey. I like to take them on a journey of how they got into coaching, what it means to them, and then, how they rose up, climb the ladder if they did, or wherever they're at, just what that path looked like. Mm-hmm. And then also what their thinking is when they prepare and then when they build programs. When they, like Dabo, you mentioned Dabo Sweeney, great man, great guy and a great friend. And he really goes into in depth on, what's it like to build a culture, because I asked him, well, how do you sustain this? Because you're riding that wave. And so he'll talk about, keeping your core values, but modernizing as you go, never selling out who your identity is, but how do you keep everyone engaged, not making it the same boring thing, because then you lose guys, you know what I mean? And with these new kids, you can lose guys that way. So he talks about that on the podcast. There's all kinds. There's some guys we talk about technique. There's receiver coaches in the NFL, the Saints, Baltimore Ravens. There's a D-line coach from the Jaguars, Tosh Lupoy. But then there's high school. I talked at length with Ron Lee, and I thought he gave some great insight on the St. Louis program and, really what it takes to be a St. Louis Crusader. And I thought it was very valuable for parents to hear coming from the head coach there. We talked to Lynn Lau when he was the head coach at Punahou. I'll be breaking down Wendell Say here soon. We had a great interview with Wendell Say, the veteran of the OIA. So I'm going to mix in different guys. And honestly, I tell you, it's harder now to get guests, even though I do have access to them. During the season, it's tough because their schedule is, they're really tight on the schedule. So we'll see. I may actually have to pause and just do some inter episodes with just coaching, like my own coach's corner and stuff like that. But yeah, check it out. I appreciate anybody. I don't want to toot my own horn kind of thing. I appreciate anybody who would take time out of their valuable lives to listen. And while they're driving in traffic, and they might find a good little nugget, because we talk about life too. A lot of stuff is, how to be successful. It applies to life, not just football. And just wisdom and knowledge. And I look at it like an educational podcast. How can we share what goes on behind the scenes in coaches' heads, and how can that apply to life, and how can it help a parent with their son or daughter, in teaching them what it's like to, rebound from adversity. All of that's in there. It's good stuff, I think. But then again, maybe I'm biased, but I think it's yeah.
Totally awesome, Coach. And that podcast is called Tips and Overthrows with Arnold Martinez. We want to thank you for being a guest on our podcast. And if I can make a request on your next podcast, whoever you have as a coach, just ask them, hey, is anybody willing to run the I formation triple option out of that and bring back the fullback? If anyone is willing to, let me know. I'd rally and be their fan.
I'm gonna ask like a Nick Saban. No. I want to ask him that. I'll ask a pro coach. And then I do have some guys in the league coming on who are offense coordinators, so I'll ask them. But hey, man, what happened to triple? They'll tell you too is they don't want to get their quarterback. But then you see Lamar Jackson runs the heck out of the ball out of RPO sometimes, right? Yeah. So when they say we don't want to get our quarterback hurt, I'm like, shoot, Lamar runs a lot sometimes. I know Patrick Mahomes, we don't want to get him hurt. Yeah. NFL's different. The quarterback is like a protected commodity. So you change the scheme to protect that guy. If you have a franchise guy, you got to keep him healthy for a long time. So that's a little different too. Yeah. But I will ask for you and say, hey man, I got a friend, man. He wants to see Full House wing T in the NFL.
Wing T. Oh my goodness. That'll bring it back to life. I tell you what. Yeah. Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time, and we look forward to the next countdown to kickoff, the new countdown to kickoff with our guest, Coach Arnold Martinez. Coach, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. Super blessed. I got to get you guys come on my side next time.
Anytime. Thanks, Coach.
All right.
Over 30 years of experience of covering Hawaii sports and telling stories can be found with BedrockSportsHawaii.com. Hawaii sports writer Nick Abramo shares his passion for insight, news, and opinions, along with stories and tales in what he calls the inexhaustible universe of athletics. Football, surfing, hockey, yes, hockey, and wrestling are some of the featured content you will find on BedrockSportsHawaii.com. For our final segment, Tiff, as we start this University of Hawaii athletic season, this academic year, I was kind of looking over kind of all the things that are happening that's exciting, but there are some things for each of several different sporting units that have some things they have to overcome, some obstacles. And it's interesting that this year, they're all going to kind of hit. And I thought it's been a while where in one academic year, there's a lot of question marks on several things with different programs. So for example, right behind you as your backdrop, the new UH will play football at this makeshift stadium on the campus. And it's at the TC Ching Athletic Complex. Looks great. They brought in bleachers and they've modified it to have luxury boxes. 9,000 seats available, although they'll not have fans for the first month. It'll eventually go to, I think, 15,000 next season. But this is a huge, huge development, I think, in the overall scope of the future of UH football in terms of, I think this is a good litmus test as to whether University of Hawaii Athletics and the university will eventually want to invest in building a stadium on campus, which has been talked about since way before I was born, which is obviously way before you were born, because I'm older than you. The other thing is, sticking with football, UH football coach Todd Graham, second season, yes. Last season was the pandemic season, shorter season. You didn't have a really off season. So this is his first year where he had a whole 360-day routine of recruiting, of off-season training, so forth and so on. So in a way, he's had a little bit of a year under his belt. This is a different quote unquote second season for him. There's a new baseball coach in Rich Hill. Mike Trapasso was not retained, which would have been, I believe he was there for 20 years, maybe 21 as a head coach for UH baseball. And many of the questions that arose when he was not retained was, well, why wasn't he not retained before? Because he had been very mediocre in a lot of what the public viewed as the head coach.
He may have had in the 20 years 3, maybe 4 good seasons, but yet the athletic department kept him on. He did a lot of good things well, but his winning and one-loss records were never that great. We go to men's basketball. Head coach Eran Ganat. This may be a pivotal year for him because he is also, aside from his first year in 2016 when he took the team to the NCAA tournament, each year has been reasonably mediocre, not being able to get past the first round of the Big West Conference. This offseason, he's had a coaching staff overhaul, and sometimes that sets off some red flags. A lot of players transferred out. And then with women's volleyball, I think it's always critical to see how the season goes when you have a new top assistant. The top assistant for Robin Amo left, who was came on when Robin first took the job here. Now, this is the first kind of significant coaching change for Robin Amo, how she will now adjust to that. So if you put all of that together, that's a lot of significant things to kind of keep your eye on in this academic year. And I may
It really is. It really is, Dave. And I think a lot of people have said this, that how football goes more often than not is how the athletic department goes. And yes, you did what you could with the time you were given to build this facility that sits behind me. A lot of work, a lot of planning went into it. It got done ahead of schedule, which, being born and raised here, you and I both know that
doesn't happen.
Is not always the case in the state. And so for them to completely finish this ahead of schedule, do it on budget, props to them, kudos to them. Is there ways somehow, if we don't have fans this year, is there a way that maybe you rent it out? Maybe ILH schools could possibly rent this out. Maybe it becomes the venue for, say, the HHSAA state tournament. Maybe you don't have a triple header at one facility on one day. Maybe you throw the Division II Maybe you throw the Division II championship there. Maybe you throw a D1, D2, and possibly an open. Maybe spread it over 2 days if UH football isn't home. Another key one is we know about the NCAA men's basketball tournament with March Madness. Teams that win units based on how many games they win in the tournament and how much money they can get for not just themselves, but for the overall conference. And so I think, especially for this year, how we know that as of right now, fans won't be allowed in. So you're going on at least a year with Hawaii sports that you're not gaining any money from ticket revenue, season tickets. It's vital for teams to be successful this year, this athletic year, to try and do as well as they can to make a postseason tournament and try to do well in that postseason tournament for whatever sport they're in, to try and help bring money back into the athletic department, because we know how strained they are. You mentioned the new baseball coach, other new coaches that have come and gone. It's a financial dire situation that, unfortunately, we discussed this at the beginning. We're the only school right now that is not having fans at football games, and that hurts. It hurts financially. It hurts just the support of the kids on game day itself. Now, of course, people will watch on TV, they'll listen on the radio, they'll find ways to follow the program and do what they can to support. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to dollars. And for a program that is not in a Power 5 conference, you're not getting that Power 5 money from television. And so you've got to be successful in other ways to try to make up for what you have lost, especially last year in the COVID seasons for respective sports when you didn't have fans to attend games.
Yeah, and it sure didn't help when this past weekend the news came out about that big gathering over on the east side of Honolulu, 300 to 400 young people. And as I read it, a lot of them identified themselves as University of Hawaii students. So, it frustrates me because they're saying that event was organized on social media as a way for young adults to be able to get out there and socialize because we have been restricted for such a long time. Well, the impact of that event could impact not only just the general health and the population, as which is already the case and how it's being looked at, a bunch of young adults being irresponsible, just going out there, not social distancing and not wearing masks, but how would it look on the University of Hawaii when every eye is on, can we get fans to come back to our events? And then you have University of Hawaii students rebelling and doing their own thing. So how does it look now to our mayor and to our governor to want to release that? So I think it was such a huge PR negative shot that a bunch of UH students, and I don't know how many, they could have asked 3 people, and the 3 people, they said, well, we're from University of Hawaii, and they ruined it for everybody. But hopefully that will not mar things moving forward. But it also puts, like you mentioned, how football goes, the more of this season for Todd Graham as the head football coach, there is more of a pressure than any other second season of any football coach will have, because he's got to have a modicum of success to generate excitement to fill those 9,000 seats. Because everyone's thinking, oh, it's 9,000 seats. We're going to have it packed because the students are there. It's a smaller capacity. So everyone's going to go there once fans are allowed. But if that team, for some reason, is not very good and does not generate the excitement, and it is not a packed 9,000 seat TC Ching athletic complex, that is going to hurt in multiple ways, not only in the financial element, but in terms of all the things I just said. Okay, what is the university going to invest in if we can't even fill 9,000 seats? Do we even bother? Well, they have to expand it to 15,000 to meet the NCAA mandate. But any vision of having a campus on stadium will probably get really withered if this year's team is not successful, or at the very least generates excitement.
Well, and we also just hope that, there's some sort of construction going on over at the old Aloha Stadium site, because it's supposedly said that it's supposed to be done in 3 years, that the season opener in 2024, if I have my years correct, that is when the new district, the entertainment district, is set to go and hosting football over there. Again, I'm born and raised here. You're born and raised here. We all know how long things take, how things continue to take. Don't mention rail. We all know how long things take here.
Rail.
Start building.
Rail. Yeah. I hear you. By the way, you're in touch with women's volleyball. I mentioned about the new top assistant, Angelica Lundquist, a former great All-American here at the University of Hawaii, was a top assistant to head coach Raman
All-American.
She leaves. Did you get a chance to even talk with Coach Robin about how the transition has been for her?
It's been good. Luckily for them, they've been able to keep on staff, basically just promote from within. So Khalil Baxter has basically become the associate head coach. It's an opportunity that allowed former Rainbow Warrior libero and a former volunteer coach, Nick Castello, to come back. And now he's an assistant. So you have another former player within the Hawaii program on the men's side now coaching on the women's side. And was it tough to see Coach Ange go? Of course. You just hope that everything is okay back at home, because she cited, needing to be closer to home and be with family. So whenever anybody says those kind of words, first and foremost, your thoughts are with their family, and you just hope that everything is good and it continues to do well for the entire family. But it was a tough situation. Little more than a month before the start of the season, maybe a little bit too late to try and look for somebody, on the 11th hour to be, to come in as an associate. Only time will tell. But again, 2-1 start, not too shabby.
Yeah, and really the measure of any college, any head coach, if you think about it, because coaching turnover is part of the deal. Coaches change year to year a lot of times. So a measure of a good head coach is how well they're able to bring in new coaches, mentor them up, develop the culture so that coaches can be interchangeable. Dave Shoji was able to do that, and that's why he was successful for decades. And let's hope Robin Amo can do the same as well. All right, we have a good. It's going to be interesting for this upcoming academic year because we got all sports playing on all cylinders, at least so far. So we can only hope that once fans start being able to be allowed in, we can get back to more normalcy than ever. So we want to thank our guest, Arnold Martinez, who joined us here on the podcast. We look forward to him being on the ESPN Honolulu Countdown, the Kickoff pregame show every week. Also tune into his podcast, Tips and Overthrows, if you want great football talk. For my partner, Tiff Wells, I'm Dave Kawada. Until the next episode, take care. And as always,
wear that mask, be socially distant, don't do any parties.